Hello, everyone. I'm Nicole.
Hey, and I'm Doug.
Welcome to Public Voices by NEOGOV.
So, this is a space where we're going to talk about what's like really happening in public sector organizations, whether you're in human resources, whether you're in city leadership, or whether you're in public safety like I was. So, before we jump in, though, I want to give a really quick thank you to our sponsor, NEOGOV, who makes this podcast possible. So, are we ready to get started?
Let's do it. So, our first topic that we're going to be chatting about is why are we here and why are we doing this?
Yeah, that's a I think that's like one of life's greatest questions. Why are we
Why
here
are
and
we here?
why are we doing this, right? So, there are a lot of really great leadership podcasts that are out there already. People listen to them all the time. They subscribe to their favorites. They just want to get to know and hear from people that are authorities in the field, whatever it happens to be. But there are significantly fewer, we'll call them private sector or the public sector rather, that are kind of what we've done in our careers. So they're private sector faced, we're public sector faced, and there are some concepts and some differences that I think resonate between the two, but also very different. Different challenges, different types of opportunities, but still the same. Whether you're private sector or whether you're sector, we just want to try and give the best possible service. So that's kind of why we're here. Both Nicole and I have been in the space for some time. We've had some of those challenges and we've had some of those opportunities, some wins and some losses. And our goal throughout this podcast is to not only have conversations between Nicole and I, but also to bring some really incredible guests along board as we start our journey together, that can bring about some real and valuable insights, some lessons learned, and quite frankly, just have a little bit of fun doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I want to add on to that the difference in private versus public sector are the people who are interested in public sector work. They're very, very unique and kind people in public sector. And I'm excited to be able to share some of those stories and bring positivity back into government.
Because we could use a little more positivity in this world, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. So let's start off telling you why are you tuning in and why are you watching us and who are we anyway? So, Nicole, you want to talk a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I just a brief background into my professional career. I actually started in public sector as a dispatcher 2 days after I graduated high school. And I did that for several years, but I could not go to school and work at the same time. So I actually transferred to human resources as the administrative assistant so I could have a normal school schedule. It was pre, virtual school back then. And I was lucky enough to have a really great director that developed me from that admin assistant all the way into someone who could take her seat when she retired. And I left the organization as HR director. Somewhere in the middle of that, I actually got appointed to run municipal court for about a year. And that's probably a different story for a different time. But I think, I grew up in a public servant home. My dad was in law enforcement. And I have always really admired public servants and learned a lot of lessons. I grew up in the public sector after being there for almost 20 years. And so excited to share some of those lessons learned for sure.
That's amazing. I actually did not know that you had been a dispatcher for a bit. That's a job
Yeah.
that I could never do. I don't have the talent, the skill set, or the patience for it. I was on the police side of things, so for me it was a little over 3 decades in policing, and I did all the different things, whether it was field training or patrol or investigations, and even was police chief in a couple places. So in all those years and all the things that both you and I've seen, there's so many different lessons that you learn about people, um, and you really kind of focus in on what your why is. And there's opportunities in the public sector that are fantastic opportunities working for a city or a county doing a wide variety of things. There's some amazing jobs, whether it happens to be maybe in parks and recreation or in police or fire or human resources or city management, whatever it happens to be. But we all kind of have our why of what we do. And so maybe you can expand a little bit on,
Yeah.
why you stayed that course in the public sector.
Yeah, so I would say probably 5 plus years ago, I think I kind of figured that out. But I heard a quote by Seth Godin, and um, the gist of the quote was, "Are you trying to prove a point, or are you trying to make a difference?" And I think for years and years, I spent a lot of time in my HR roles trying to prove a point and trying to be the smartest person in the room. But that quote really clicked with me when I realized that's not effective. And really, the goal of government is to make a difference. And so I really shifted my way of approaching things, the way of talking to people, and I've really tried to be that person who's making a difference versus being a roadblock.
Yeah,
What
I think
about you?
that's incredible. So, yeah, congratulations, you've dropped the first knowledge bomb on all of us here. So
Yeah.
that's a great quote. I love that quote. I've not heard that quote before, but it really resonates. The ability to try and make a difference. So, yeah,
It's
that's
hard.
amazing. It
Yeah,
is.
it's hard. It's really hard to not try to prove a point, right? That's very easy to pull out the emails and the receipts and have a really great argument, but that really turns people off and kind of just throws a wrench in everything. So it's not effective by
The
any
struggle
means.
is real, but I'm sure we all
Yeah.
have days like that. But on those days where we
Mhm.
realize where we're trying to really make a difference, I think I appreciate that. And I think from my perspective, it's funny because when I started in policing a long time ago, one of the main reasons I joined was because of the TV series Cops, which I know maybe is not the best reason to join policing, but it was exciting and it was something that wasn't behind a desk. And at the end of the day, I knew that I also wanted to help people. So if I could combine the fun and the things that you see, which we all know television isn't necessarily accurate, um, with the ability to help people, I think that's the driving factor. And I think there were so many things throughout my career, not major incidents necessarily, but smaller moments. I think that where you feel like you're having an impact on the community and the world around you, that you're not getting a letter of commendation for. There's no medal waiting for you later down the road and no awards ceremony, but you feel like you've actually made a difference with people. And I think when we're in public service, that's really why we do what we do, because there are private sector jobs that are great jobs. They might pay more than what we do in the public sector, but that ability to really affect people, whether it's what you've done or what I've done or what our listeners do in the public sector space, I think that ability to help people at the end of the day is the difference maker for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of what this podcast is going to be about, right? Is showcasing what's happening behind the scenes and the small impacts that individuals are making in their community daily versus things that are in the news, because those are very, very different things. And the news is only showing highlight reels, typically, again, the negative things. And we want to talk about what are our public employees doing well and what are they doing to impact their communities and keep them safe. So I'm
Yeah.
excited for how this will go.
Yeah, I love it. And you bring up something that I love to talk about all the time. I did public information, so I did media
Um,
relations for a little over a decade. My chief, it was one of those other duties as assigned that was supposed to last for like 2 years, and it lasted for 13. But it was an amazing chance to really tell the story, to your exact point, of all the things that we know that our public servants are doing, whether it's our dispatchers who deliver a child through 911, or our officers can go out and serve, or our parks folks that are ensuring safe environments for people when they go out and they get together for some event. I mean, it runs the gamut across the public sector. There are so many things that we do, seemingly small things every single day, but those stories aren't the ones that you see on the front page of your favorite news app or that headline the nightly news, those kinds of things. You have to really push those things out. And we've used, I think, social media really well on that to an extent. But even then, we still have to drive that conversation to highlight those wins because they're out there all the time. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm most excited about this podcast is that you and I get to bring on people, all walks of life, different cities, counties, I mean, all kinds of people with different experiences, and really talk about specifically, what they've done that maybe others can replicate, those wins, and maybe some hard lessons learned too. About things that have happened, and then people can take those back to their own organizations and saying, "I know I can do it because he or she did that," and you can replicate those things. So I think those wins are super important.
yeah, absolutely. And that was my favorite part about being in HR was truly seeing the pride that our employees have in their work and just hearing how excited they are to talk about those wins or those lessons learned. And again, share that with everyone because we have that in our own small organizations, but it'll be really great to spread that to other listeners.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one thing that I really want to look at and something to focus on is real world challenges, because we all know that, look, life is tough, work is tough. It's not a cakewalk when you go to work, no matter what the job is, and we face very real things, particularly in the public sector. I mean, we've got people within the community that are relying upon us to do our jobs, whatever that happens to be, whether it's making sure the streets are cleared from snow in the wintertime, or whether it's making sure we respond to that emergency call, or making sure we just respond to people for their concerns within their community so they can feel safe and secure. um, there's a lot of challenge with that. And I think the opportunity to address some of those challenges in a way that's very upfront, I think, is what we're going for here. We're not going to shy away from things. We're not going to tiptoe around challenges. I think what we want to do is really look at some head on things, or things head on rather, and try and figure out how do we problem solve those kinds of issues together collectively. And we'll do that a lot through some of the guests that we bring on throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I know that is a big topic for our listeners is going to be culture and workplace culture. How does that look to you in a public safety agency?
Culture is it's so I laugh because it's something that we've been talking about for so long, and for a while, culture was just sort of a secondhand. It was almost a kind of a culture by design versus culture by default feel. And what I mean culture by default, and I referenced it earlier when I talked about why I got into policing, but the culture by default is really when we watch TV or movies, there's a certain feel to the culture of policing. And it's whether it's a episode of like Reno 911 all the way to Cops to CSI, I don't know, pick a city because there's like 20 of them now, right? But that's not really what it's about. But people have perceptions that that's what it's really about, that people think that's what the culture of policing is really like. And in fact, it's really not on so many levels. But when we look within the organizations that we lead or that we serve in, it's funny, we don't really spend that much time, or haven't in the past really spent that much time on the development of the culture. And what we've learned over the past several years, especially with a newer workforce, is that the culture really does matter to the people that come in, because they want to feel like they're a part of an organization. They want to feel like they're contributing. They want to feel like they have value, and they want to feel like they're doing something that's maybe a little bit bigger than themselves. And we've been slow to adapt and adopt that really for policing. We're 20 years behind the private sector on that. We're making some adjustments, and there's a lot more talk about organizational culture now, which is very healthy, but it can also be a little painful because you have to face the realities of maybe what's not going so well. And sometimes that happens a lot. What about on your side, like the HR side? Because you've got this broad overview of things. What's that look like?
Yeah, I think culture is exactly what you said, the perception, and I think it is a buzzword and has been for a long time, and a lot of people don't even know where to start. They might know their culture doesn't feel good, or the employees don't necessarily enjoy the culture, but they're not sure where to start. The best description I've ever heard, or the best definition of culture, is people like us do things like this. And so when you think of it very simplistically like that, it could be, my HR team, we celebrated employee wins. So we celebrated weddings and babies and birthdays and anniversaries, but that was part of our culture, right? Culture could also be maybe the public works team shames each other when they take family medical leave when they have a baby, right? Culture is good and bad, and it is your day to day interactions and it is your behavior. And so when you look at it kind of in a more granular microscope, I think that you really can see a lot of how your employees are behaving and how they're reacting. And I think a lot of organizations have really fancy mission statements and they have really great value statements. But if you're not practicing those every day and you're not holding each other accountable to those things and those definitions of how we want our employees to be, that is your culture, right? You don't have accountability. So I'm excited to talk about that as well because I think culture is so broad and there's so many elements of it and everything impacts your culture.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a few episodes on culture. I'm just kind of getting this feeling that we're going to talk about culture a little
Yeah.
bit,
Yeah. It's a
just
good
a little
one.
bit. Yeah, and you mentioned specifically, mission and value and vision statements and those types of things. And I always ask agencies when I go and talk to them, like, how do you operationalize those values? It may be great that you have respect and integrity and professionalism as your values, but how do you actually operationalize those, and how did the folks that work with you, all your colleagues, really know how what that means to them when they go out and do their duties? So that's a great point. And it's funny, there was a poll this year, a Gallup poll, and I like the Gallup polls because I feel like there's some authority with them, and we're actually going to post the link in the comments, so you can have access to that. But it's the poll to talk about kind of culture and how things are really going in organizations, and particularly about what engagement in the job. And there's some interesting findings from 2026 and talking about what that looks like. And they one of the most interesting things I think is that there's globally employee engagement is falling, and at a fairly significant scale, like at 20% globally of all employees worldwide are actually engaged in their work this last year. So think about that a minute. If you've got 100 people, 20 people that work there are like, yeah, we love coming to work. We're working really hard and all those kinds of things. Now that, as you would imagine, relates to lost productivity, a feeling of it's not a fun job. I don't enjoy coming to work. There's not a lot of optimism, those kinds of things. And the most maybe frightening thing of all that is that managers are actually the biggest driver of that decline. And when we see managers, and I differentiate between managers and leaders, but when we see managers who really have no buy-in or no enthusiasm about their job, you and I both know that translates down to the people that are actually doing the work. So it's interesting to see that evolution. And as we bring some people on, we're going to talk about some of those same challenges. Maybe they've seen, maybe you and I've seen, and how we've counteracted that to really get people engaged as much as possible in their work.
Yeah, absolutely. Formal leadership is one of my passions, right? Because I think formal leaders have the ability to make or break anything and can really be the champions or they can really fail things that you're trying to put into place. And so I am excited to talk about that.
Yeah, I think in the end, I think the one of the biggest things that we do talk about is talking about the challenges and changes in culture and where that starts. And as we think about all that, it's just a weird world, but even especially post COVID, everything has changed since 2020 in terms of how we communicate with one another, how we expect people to communicate with us. What's that look like in terms of burnout? And I think when we talk about people when they join organizations today, it's really important to a lot of people to have that extra time off and to go do the things that they want to do outside of work. So it's beyond just the work experience; it's like the lived experience. And I don't know that we're as far along in that as we need to be in the public sector, but I think we're now realizing it and we're trying to make some changes and adaptations to look at those types of things. And of course that all, leads to like fluctuations in morale and stress and burnout. And of course we'll do some episodes on wellness too, which is finally being discussed a little bit more openly than it used to be. But I think these are all current topics and things people probably want to talk about and learn more about in the process and how to mitigate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll be great to have deeper dives into those topics and help formal and informal leaders show up more and show up in a better way so they can have a ripple impact on their teams and their organization.
Yeah, and we all know that. Look, when you're in the public sector, you can't control everything outside your organization. I mean, there are people that just have consistent challenges with workers in the public sector, and we get it. We understand it's human nature, and there are things that we have to do and do better consistently. We can't always control that. We can work through that to better understand how we can adapt and change and evolve to make sure that we're serving the communities that we serve in the best way possible. But there are some things that we just really can't change. But internally, I think there are things that we can do to make sure that when we do have people that we work with, our colleagues, no matter what the rank or the role is, that we do have the ability to empower them in the right way to go out and just be the best version of themselves. And I think when we find we have happier, more fulfilled employees in some way, shape, or form, they're just going to do a better job out in the field.
Yeah, and I think the control brings up a really great point too, because a lot of people have the perception that HR is the group that is responsible for culture, right? And it is not all on HR. It is everyone's responsibility, frontline employees, frontline supervisors, all the way up to directors and chiefs. So I think that is one thing too to keep in mind that we are all part of the culture. We all impact it. And this is not just HR's responsibility.
100%. And it's funny you would say that because sometimes if I'm in a class or something, we'll talk about, well, who's in charge of culture, who's responsible for culture in the organization. Well, some will say, well, the chief is. Well, no, actually, we all are. Everybody from literally every rank, every position within the agency. So I think that's a great point to bring up. And some folks will like implement some sort of cultural improvement program, but it's not supposed to be a program. And it's ironic because back in the early 90s when community policing, which is really the community and the police working together to problem solve and fight crime and those types of things, it's truly a partnership. Some agencies started it as a, well, this is our community policing unit. And so only those officers that were assigned to that unit were expected to go out and use the principles and philosophies of community policing, which has been around since the, a long time ago back in London when the Metropolitan Police were founded. But it was like relegated to this one particular unit instead of just saying, look, this is our overarching philosophy of how we want to treat the public and how we want the public to interact with us. But it's beyond just community policing, it's that community relationship, just like you talked about.
Yeah, it's how can I show up today and make the culture better? Or maybe I'm not showing up that great and I'm impacting the culture in a negative way. But it really is about me as an individual and what I contribute, not what my boss can do better, not what the city manager can do better. It is collectively as a whole, how can we all be better?
Yep. And you've been a director of HR, I've been a chief. Ultimately, while we're not in charge, quote unquote, in charge of culture, um, we still do set the tone. And so
Absolutely.
if we allow for those types of conversations to be had where we're open, we're a little vulnerable about what we want this to look like, how we can empower people better, I think that does set a positive tone to say, all right, we are trying to actually adapt and make this culture a little bit better in that particular way. But there's some responsibility with that leadership for sure.
Absolutely. Just everyone should be open to feedback, right? But especially high level leaders, because, like you said, we do have a responsibility to set the tone. I
Yeah,
100% agree with that.
for sure. And we've covered some things, a few things here and there. We've done a little
Hmm.
deep dives with,
Yeah.
you've done the first awesome quote. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Now the bar is set. So now I've got to work really hard to have really good quotes the next several times. So I think as we look to the future, we're going to keep having these types of conversations. And as we evolve and continue this podcast, the goal is to really face these challenges that all of you who are listening or watching are just dealing with on the daily in your organizations. And the goal is to maybe learn some new things, to have some laughs along the way, just to enjoy the conversations that we're having and with the guests that we're going to bring on. We're going to talk about, workforce challenges. We're going to talk about, gaps that we see in leadership. We're going to talk about, we'll call them generational shifts, even though that term is probably a little overused in some ways. We're going to talk about hiring and retention. We're going to talk about things like AI and technology and data silos and all that stuff. So the bottom line is this, is that we are here to kind of help you along, and then we will learn in the process about a lot of great things as we bring different guests on as well too, within the public sector. And you're not alone in this. So we're here to build support, understanding, and just trying to grow together as we try and make it a better way to go things.
I agree. I just want to reemphasize you're not alone. I think, Doug and I, based on our experience and the individuals that we're talking to every day, everyone has very similar struggles in the public sector. And hopefully, this podcast will help you guys connect and realize that you truly are not alone in the challenges that you're facing or even maybe the wins that you're having.
Right. Yeah, great points. So, well, this is it for our first episode. We really wanted to kind of give you a taste of what we're going to be doing in the future. We've got some great ideas lined up, a lot of amazing people lined up as well, and we're excited to bring that to you. We want to thank you for joining Public Voices, and we want to once again thank our sponsor, NEOGOV, which is the leading HR software provider in the public sector, for really sponsoring and helping us along as we begin this journey together. So be sure to follow us and stream us wherever you happen to listen to podcasts. And you can even rate us, even though I know Nicole with the quote will get the higher rating this time. It's all good, nothing personal. It's a team effort here. But we hope that today's discussion and our future discussions are something for you to maybe think about, some key points that you walk away from, maybe have that talk with somebody around the water cooler or the coffee pot about, hey, I heard about this. What's your thought on that? Just to kind of spark some conversation, spark some idea. And if there's something in addition that you'd like us to cover, please send it in to us. We'd love to hear from you because you're the ones out there doing the job. Until next time, we're just going to keep the conversation going. We hope you do the same, and we'll be on the same time next week. We hope to see you soon.
Bye, everyone.